Questions remain after the disclosure of an Iranian terror plot here in the U.S., where Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the U.S. was reportedly targeted for assassination. Our guest is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers. Welcome back to Newsmax, Representative.
Ashley, thanks for having me back.
Senate Intelligence Chairman Dianne Feinstein said after a closed-door intelligence briefing to the Senate that there may be a chain of these things and that there's information that Iranians may have other targets. What's your take on this?
Well, I think this highlights who the Quds force and the Revolutionary Guard in Iran is for not only the American people but the public. This is a very high-profile particular case, the targeting of the ambassador. So you can imagine that this is not likely the first time nor the last time that they have intentions to use assassination violently on other embassies, other countries, other places around the world. And it's important to know that the Quds force has been up to no good and dangerous activities for years and went relatively unmolested by the rest of the world, unchallenged by the rest of the world. And I think that's what led to this very brazen activity. And I think one could extrapolate that there's likely to be other plans, or they did have other plans in the works.
Could this be considered an act of war? And if so, how should the U.S. respond?
I look at it this way. This is an opportunity for the United States, with public support, now that they've publicly seen what the Revolutionary Guard and the Quds force and the Iranian government is capable of, to actually really step up and get aggressive with Iran in a couple of ways. One is to get our European allies, who have been okay but not great when it comes to sanctions, really stepping that up. They have lots of business contracts in Iran that could be very hurtful if those commercial relationships were severed. We could use this as an opportunity to tell China and Russia, who have been absolutely hurdles for us to be more aggressive with Iran when it comes to sanctions, to say, listen, this is your chance. Now, publicly, you get to express to the world you're going to stand with a nation who sponsors terrorism and violent assassinations in the Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, or you can stand with the rest of the international community, your choice. And we need to be very aggressive about the Quds force elements that are in Iraq and Afghanistan, who are deliberately facilitating the deaths of U.S. soldiers. And they've been doing that for years. There's a great State Department unclassified report about that. It was released in 2010. And I think if you did all of those combination of events very quickly, if this takes 6 or 8 or 9 months, too late, I think you could have a tremendous impact on bringing Iran back to heel.
You mentioned China and Russia. Their oil companies are still doing business with Iran. Should we put the squeeze on those countries for that?
Absolutely. And again, this is where the challenge can come in. If you recall, they've always said that they'd vote against, they'd veto any stronger sanctions, they wouldn't participate in sanctions. And part of it was because it was very self-serving. They were gaining economic gain from Iran's relationship with them. And that's why it's so important for us as international community standing together to say, hey, wait a minute, you have to make a choice here. You're going to be for them and for their state sponsor of terrorism, or you're going to be with the rest of the international community. This is your chance. Now, again, I don't think that, I'm not Pollyannish to believe that they're just all of a sudden going to change their mind, but we need to make them very uncomfortable in what is a very bad decision to support Iran and allow those activities to go on unfettered.
U.S. officials have not offered any specific evidence linking the plot to Iran's most powerful leaders. Iran denies involvement, period. In your opinion, were Iran's leaders behind this?
Well, here's what we know. Obviously, a relation of the actor, the operative who was trying to put it together, was a fairly senior Quds force officer. We know in the practice of the Al-Quds operations that they've done around the world, all over the world, that they have a very tight command and control. This was an operation that would have cost $1.5 million. So you know someone senior in there has already been involved. You know that the Quds force has a relationship, a direct command relationship between the Quds force commander and the supreme leader. It is pretty reasonable for somebody to deduce that because of the senior level that we know was involved, that the likelihood is pretty good that there was a senior, at least sign-off on an operation that was A, very expensive, and B, would have taken place in a pretty violent act with serious repercussions if it went wrong in the United States, and on top of it, in the United States Capitol to boot.
A senior member of Iran's parliament calls this a new American Zionist plot to divert public opinion from the crisis Obama is grappling with. What do you say to that?
Nice try. But evidence is evidence. I'm a former FBI agent. I can tell you I've looked at the case. I've looked at the evidence, was briefed when this thing started to unfold months ago, and they have nowhere to go, including the cooperation, by the way, of the individual that was arrested, who was eager to cooperate with the United States on this particular matter. It is just, you would expect them to say it. This fits in with their rhetoric, but I'll tell you, the evidence in this case is incredibly strong, and that's why you see such a widespread agreement. I mean, Republicans and Democrats and senior intelligence officials and DOJ officials. Yes, this happened. Yes, it was tied to Iran. Yes, this crossed a very dangerous threshold.
Your Republican House colleague, Peter King, the Homeland Security Chairman, wants Obama to expel Iranian diplomats from the U.S. Good idea or not?
Well, I'd be careful. I mean, we don't have a formal diplomatic relationship as it stands. There's a consulate, I think, up in New York that we do some dealings with. I always believe that even at time of tension, extreme tension, you need at least somebody to talk to either de-escalate or make an agreement about why they ought to change their ways. So I'd be a little careful about going there, but it doesn't mean that we should not be incredibly aggressive about targeting Quds Force people in Iraq and Afghanistan, about making sure that the Quds Force operatives, wherever they are in the world, are having a very difficult operating and continue to put pressure on Iran. You want somebody here, at least one person, to say, we give. And I think it's probably in our best interest to keep at least one of them around for that purpose.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel will not permit Iran to get a nuclear weapon. He also indicates Iran may be just a year or two away from getting such a weapon. Do you agree with that timeline? And should the U.S. be more aggressive, even consider a military strike on Iran?
You know, my committee, and I was on the intelligence subcommittee at the time, released a report that was pretty aggressive for its time, about 2006, on Iran and their pursuit of nuclear weapons. And it's very clear that I was more right than I think we wanted to be in 2006, just about how aggressive they were. They have publicly stated that they're going to pursue a nuclear program. We know for a fact that they are pursuing elements that you might need to make and enrich uranium to make it weapons grade uranium. All of that we know is happening. So yes, I do agree that the timeline, that some people argue shorter. If you wanted to say 2 years, okay, but the longer we put off aggressive international approach to this, the worse off we're all going to be. Imagine a nation state who's engaged in trying to kill U.S. soldiers and coalition forces in Iraq, who is plotting to kill an ambassador, a Saudi ambassador to the United States here in Washington, D.C. Oh, by the way, they're going to get nuclear weapons, which is one of the reasons Saudi, we think, was targeted, because they've been so aggressive about saying it is really dangerous if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. It's destabilizing to the whole region, and it unleashes the hordes of their intelligence service to do really bad things.
House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers, we really appreciate you taking some time out from your busy schedule in Washington to speak with us.
Hey, Ashley, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.